At 91, Dolores Huerta is a living civil rights icon. She has spent most of her life as a political activist fighting for better working conditions for farm workers and the rights of the downtrodden. A firm believer in the power of political organizing to affect change. You're going to have an opportunity to meet this amazing icon. Coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report.
Co-founder of the United Farm Workers Association, Dolores Clara Fernandez Huerta, I hope I got that right, is one of the most influential labor activists of the 20th century and the Chicano civil rights movement. I am so super excited to welcome Dolores Huerta back to the Special Report. I had a chance to talk with her a couple of months ago, but now I get to go one-on-one with her and talk about her just amazing life and career. So good morning, Dolores, and thank you so much for coming back to the Special Report. I've been waiting to sit down with you and have this conversation because you are one of my idols. When I think about women who have accomplished so much in the field of civil rights, you are, you're at the top of the list. You've done so much for so many people. I want to first start by, though, asking you about Vice President Kamala Harris, who I know you supported. I know you have worked with her in California, and Joe Biden. We have two Democrats in the White House. We have control of the Congress. How does this make you feel, knowing that we have an opportunity with those two in the White House to make some real changes in this country?
Well, I feel like many Americans, we feel a great sense of relief, a great sense of hope. We know that our country is moving forward and not backwards. And many of the challenges that are facing us right now, I think that we all feel that now we can really meet those challenges and do something to change our society and make life more equitable for everybody.
So we know that Joe Biden was planning his big, speech. He wasn't calling it a State of the Union. He just, was making a presentation to Congress. And one of the things he talked about in that presentation was how he just came right in, stepped to this whole issue of vaccine and the vaccine rollout. How happy have you been with, what the Biden administration was able to do in their first 100 days with respect to rolling out vaccines, particularly to the farm worker community?
Well, it's extremely important, as you know, people of color, indigenous people, we have been the most hard hit by the pandemic. And it also, of course, highlights all of the existing conditions of the lack of health care that is provided to our community. So it kind of opened up that door also. And he said he was going to do it, and he did do it. And it just shows that the power of our government and what our government can do when they're trying to do the right thing. And that is exactly what Joe Biden is doing.
Yeah, I know you had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady. She was in California a couple of months ago to really encourage farm workers to get vaccinated. What was it like to spend some time with our new First Lady?
Well, it was wonderful. I had met Dr. Biden before when Joe Biden was, of course, in the Senate, and also, of course, when he was vice president. I was able to go to their home, and I went a few times to his home when he was the vice president of the United States. And she's a very gracious woman, and the fact that she's a teacher is so important, and the fact that she's keeping her job as a teacher also, I think, says a lot. And by the way, we were given these little clips to show that we were vaccinated.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was super excited when I saw her in the state of California, and definitely going to the farm workers community, because we know how hard hit that community has been with respect to COVID-19. I want to ask you about this $1.8 trillion plan that Biden has laid out, his plan to provide universal preschool, 2 years of free community college, and expanded access to child care. These are things that Democrats, particularly Democrats like me, a mother, we've been hoping for this for a long time. So how do you feel knowing that we have someone in the White House that's going to really focus on education?
Well, we know that education is going to be the savior of our democracy, especially we can start getting ethnic studies like we're going to be doing here in California in our high school. Although I think we need to roll it down to the elementary school level because we know that children are not born racist. They're made that way by their parents or the culture that they grow up in. And that is a really important issue. And education is really the foundation of our democracy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said after the Great Depression, after the Great Depression, he brought in arts and music and dance into our public schools. Of course, now we know they have been taken out of our schools, and we need to get them to be brought back in. But he also said during World War II that he would not take one dime out of our education budget or our libraries, because he said education is the soul of the country, the soul of our nation.
Wow. So it's amazing when you think about what Roosevelt said about education. Now to have Biden in the White House saying universal preschool, 2 years of free community college, and really making education a big focus of his administration. The other thing that Biden, he ran on was immigration reform. We watched for the last 4 years under Donald Trump the most horrific things, get played out at the border in terms of the treatment of immigrants who were, crossing or people trying to come into the country at the southern borders. We saw these really inhumane practices under Donald Trump. What kind of grade do you give Joe Biden in his first 100+ days as it relates to immigration?
Well, I think right now he's getting definitely an A. Just, getting the stimulus checks to people, doing the infrastructure bill that he's doing. He's fighting, as you know, to get the For the People Act to protect people's voting rights, which we know that many state legislatures are trying, the Republicans are trying to take away people's voting rights. And these are all the things that Joe Biden is supporting and supported. And of course, I want to mention the Equal Rights Amendment for women, okay, which is also in the U.S. Senate. And we want people to be sure and contact their senators. And there's a website. The website is ERAYES2021.org.
Wow.
It's ERAYES2021.org. So we want women to go to that website and to please call your senator to make sure that we can get equal rights for women into the Constitution of the United States of America in 2021. We can make that happen.
It's time. It's time for equal rights for women. It's kind of amazing that here we are in 2021 still fighting for equal rights. We know as it relates to that immigration policy, Joe Biden has said he wants to make a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million or so dreamers. Is that the kind of compassionate immigration policies you hope get passed under Biden-Harris administration? And do you think they need to go further?
Well, actually, this is, of course, has been the policy of the United States when the first immigrants that came to the United States from Europe. The first immigrants that came to the United States, to this country from Europe, were granted legalization and citizenship. And that has always been the policy of the United States of America. So it's nothing different than what we've always done before. But I think President Biden is going a little bit further, because he's also looking at the countries where a lot of the people are coming from, and to see what is it that's causing they're having to leave their countries. We know a lot of it is poverty, a lot of it is crime, and to see what he can do to help those countries with their own economic development and providing safety for their citizens, as we're trying to do here in our own country, provide safety for our citizens, especially our citizens of color.
Yeah, no, that's so true, Dolores. Talked a lot about Joe Biden and what our hopes are for his presidency. Now I want to talk a little about you personally. I did, a lot of research getting ready for this interview, reading about your career and how you got started in the whole farm workers movement, and really fascinating, learned a lot of fascinating facts about you. Like you were a teacher yourself in your early career. Tell us about that. How did you go from teacher to, farm worker organizer?
Well, in those days, the farm workers were in such dire poverty, and I had learned how to organize from my mentor, a gentleman named Fred Ross Sr., and I thought, well, maybe I can do more to help the farm workers to organize into a union, and then by trying to teach their hungry children. And so I made that very important decision, and I have never regretted it to this day.
Well, was there some pivotal moment, Dolores, when you thought, that was your life's calling, that you really needed to be out front organizing workers? Was there any one incident, or was it a series of incidents that really motivated you?
Well, I think once that I saw our first victories that we could achieve when people were able to go to city council meetings and board of supervisors meetings and demand service, especially from our public agencies and our public officials. This to me is like a big tool that we have that we do not use enough, because people really sometimes they don't understand how democracy works, because all of the people that work in public agencies, all of our representatives in the state legislatures, on school boards, and the Congress, they work for us.
Yeah.
We pay their salaries through our taxes, and so we can make demands on them. But in order for people to understand that they have that power to do that, that we've got to engage them, and we've got to make them understand that this is how a democracy works. This is what a democracy is. But if you do not engage in civic actions and civic activity, then we are not really using our democracy the way that we should. And to your previous question about education, there was a Spanish philosopher named Jose Ortega y Gasset before the Franco regime took over Spain, Franco the dictator. And this gentleman, he wrote a book called The Revolution of the Masses. And his thesis was that if you do not have an educated citizenry, then the greedy and the corrupt will govern. And that is so important. So this is why education is so important, not only so that we can challenge and get rid of racism and get homophobia, sexism, people that don't believe in science, for instance, and this is why education is so crucial. And of course, that's one of the things that the president is also doing, putting $100 billion to support our educational system, our teachers. But then we, on our end, we have to fight to make sure that in our curriculums that we have the real history of the United States of America, what the contributions have been of our indigenous people, the slaves who built the White House and the Congress, the immigrants that came to this country and built the infrastructure of the United States and continue doing the really hard work to keep our society going, functioning.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Education is the key. And we know too many Black and brown students don't have access to high quality education. So that's, again, why what Biden is proposing in terms of getting kids, into a school setting, even before kindergarten, is so critically important. I want to talk a little about, some of the most pivotal moments of your organizing history. People often talk about that Delano farm workers strike that you led involving grape pickers. Tell us a little about what happened. I guess that was in 1970s or so, how you became the leader of a strike that really changed the nature of how those grape pickers were paid and how they were treated.
Well, at that point, farm workers did not even have toilets in the field. If you can imagine people that are out there picking your food, that's going to go on your dinner table, and they didn't even have hand washing facilities, didn't have a restroom where they could go to out there in the fields. This is the way that the workers were being treated. And this, of course, is you might say, this comes from slavery, when you expect people to work for nothing to make other people wealthy. And of course, that's applied today with our labor unions also, when we want workers to work for less than a minimum wage, or our minimum wage is too low, and we expect them to do that work. And the conditions were miserable for the workers. So it was just inhuman the way that workers were being treated, earning 50 cents an hour when we started organizing. And we knew that this had to change. And the only way that it could change is for the workers. They had to come together, organize, and stand up for themselves. And it actually took 3 years of organizing before we had that first strike. We organized the workers in their homes, family by family, from 1962 to 1965, before that strike happened.
Wow, it took 3 years to convince the workers. I imagine there was a lot of fear. I would imagine a lot of these workers were very concerned about what would happen to them. How were you able to get them to take now, it doesn't seem like it's such a bold action, but I can imagine in the 60s, that was an incredibly bold action on the part of those workers.
Yes, and especially since all of the workers pretty much were people of color. There were a few that weren't, but most of them were people of color that we were organizing: Latinos, Puerto Ricans, African Americans, Filipinos. So it took a long. But once they understood that and they had the courage to stand up, then of course they were able to make the changes for themselves. And so that's our message that we want to give out to everybody: that we all have to stand up and we have to fight for progressive values in our country, because we are the richest country in the world, and there is no reason why we should have anybody hungry. We should not have anybody homeless. Everybody should be able to get a good college education, and of course free healthcare also for everybody, like they do in other countries in Europe and in Latin America and even in Cuba.
Yeah. Your work is so iconic and so groundbreaking that there's actually a documentary that was made about your work in 2017 or so called Dolores. And it actually chronicles your evolution from a teenager, looking at the injustices that you saw as a teenager and how outraged you were by those injustices. And it follows you and it, talks about that nationwide, or in the doc, you learn about this nationwide boycott of, those farm workers, those grape pickers. And I think according to what I read about the documentary, 17 million people stopped buying grapes as a result of this boycott.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what made it happen, because in our strikes, they always brought in strike breakers to replace the people that were working in the fields. The people that were striking, they brought more people to come in and take their jobs. And so it was really the American public, those 17 million Americans that went out there and supported the farm workers, people that they did not even know. And I think that is such a strong message, that we know that the majority of the people in our country are people of good hearts. And that when we come together, we can really do miracles. And that is what the American public did for the farm workers. Just by that simple act of not eating grapes, not shopping at stores that were selling the grapes, they got the growers to come down and negotiate with the workers and give them the basic human rights that they needed.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. We saw, Dr. King obviously used a similar model in the 1950s and 60s, during some of the civil rights boycotts and strikes. Cesar Chavez, I want to talk a little about him. You're a co-founder. You guys worked very closely together. But I was reading something that said that, some people believe that your work and your contribution to the movement was overshadowed by Cesar Chavez. And even though you were, an equal partner in the movement, that oftentimes people, associate the movement with him and aren't as familiar with you. Do you think that's a fair critique?
Well, Cesar Chavez was a genius. I mean, I cannot think of anybody that I've ever met that is as smart as Cesar, as committed as he was, even though he never had a chance to even go to high school. But he was constantly educating himself. He always had a book under his arm. And although, when people, I feel like I have gotten a lot of recognition, but I always stand on the backs of the people, all of the farm workers. We had 5 martyrs, 5 people that were killed in our movement just because they were trying to get the basic things that I talked about, cold drinking water, getting paid a decent wage so that they could support their families, the right to join a union. We had 5 people that were killed in our movement that people don't even know their names. So when we think about getting recognition, I think about them. And I think about the people that went to jail, hundreds that went to jail that were beaten, trying to build this union that they now have, that the farm workers now have. So when it comes to recognition, I think I stand on the backs of all of them. And I have no lack of recognition or no lack of celebrity.
Yeah, no, that's true. You're a big celebrity in the eyes of millions of people across this country. One of the things that came out in the documentary too is your life. You are a mother of 11 kids, and you were a divorced mother at a time when that was kind of considered to be unconventional. And there's a line, I guess, in the documentary where one of your opponents is asking, like, where are your kids, or who's supporting those kids while you're out, doing this kind of work? What was it like to be a mother of 11 kids, raising a family while being so active in the labor movement?
Well, I was very lucky because I had my children at different times. My older daughters were able to help me with the younger kids, as they do in many families. And like mothers all over the world, we have to find people to help us watch our children while we go out and work. And so when we think that the President Biden is really striving for universal child care, I think all of the women are going to be so happy to hear that, because we know that's something that we desperately need, because we need women in not only in the workplace, but we need women in civic life. We need women in public life. We need their wisdom, their compassion, and their leadership.
But were you shamed, Dolores, back then? We talk now a lot about mom shaming, and, women are often criticized and judged when they work outside the home, when, their kids are either being taken care of by family members or nannies or babysitters or whatever. So I'm trying to put my mind in the frame of someone working in the 50s and the 60s before it was, quote unquote, okay for women to work outside the home. Were people critical of you that, you weren't the traditional stay-at-home mom?
Yes, I was criticized a lot, but my mother was also a working mom. My mother worked in a cannery. She worked as a waitress. Eventually, she saved enough money to start her own business. So my mother was my example. And so I just felt that was normal to be able to work outside the home. And like many women, you have to try to find who's going to take care of your children. Are they going to be safe? Are they going to be fed? And so it's always hard for working moms, but hopefully we do get this universal child care. Women can know that their children are going to be not only taken care of, but they're also going to be educated at the same time.
Yeah, I know in the documentary, your children are in the documentary, and they give these really powerful testimonies about, how much respect they have for you and, what it was like growing up having such a powerful mom. Do you have any regrets at all about, raising your kids in the circumstances in which you did? A lot of mothers often say they wish they had had more time at home with their kids. Do you ever have any of those feelings?
Oh, of course I do. But at the same time, all of my children have been very resourceful. They grew up very poor, but they all became professionals, and they all have great jobs. And my oldest son is a doctor, and my second son is an attorney. I have a daughter who's been a teacher. I have a daughter who's a nurse, and she's an oncology nurse. She takes care of cancer patients. I have a son who's a chef, and I could just go on and on. All of my kids
you have been like the super mom. You have all these incredibly successful kids. So thank you for showing women, even at a time, like I said, when it wasn't popular to work outside the home, that it's possible, and you can raise really successful kids and change the world, which is what you were essentially able to do. But what was it like for other women back then, Dolores? I'm just really curious about working in the field. Some of those farm workers, what did they face? Were they subject to sexual harassment and sexual assault? Was that prevalent for the women who were working in the fields?
Yes. The women farm workers have been subjected to so much sexual harassment. It was almost like it was part of the job. When you went out there to work in the fields, that you could expect a foreman or a labor contractor to hit on you. I mean, some of the stories were so horrific, actually. I met women who really had children from the labor contractors, had to have sex with the foreman to make sure that they had job security. We can believe that it went that far. And the stories, well, now we do have laws now that are in place that are against sexual harassment. And the one thing, in California, we have a very good law, and actually, and it's hard sometimes for women to report the sexual harassment because they're afraid not only that they will lose their job, but the whole family will lose a job, because sometimes families work together. But now we have very good laws where when they come out and they actually report these abuses, that it will be confidential. And so to take away that fear. And there have been some very big cases here in California where women have been able to report that. And by the way, in other states also, a friend of mine who's an attorney, Monica Ramirez, she was representing female workers in Georgia from sexual harassment.
Wow, that's really powerful, and I'm so glad to hear, because again, I'm just trying to take my audience back to what it was like. I don't think people have any idea, what that time period was like, and what the horrific conditions under which farm workers have had to live and to work, and we reap the benefits of their labor. We eat the food, we buy the produce, we buy the fruit, and people don't necessarily know what it takes to get that fruit and those vegetables to our tables. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen? Obviously you talked about the sexual harassment. Now there being opportunities for the women to report the harassment, but what are some of the other biggest changes in the working conditions that have happened as a result of your efforts and the efforts of others?
Well, the one good thing is one of the big things, as I mentioned before, the fact that they didn't have the toilets in the fields, and now that is a law throughout the United States of America that they have to provide those toilets. The other one for men and one for women, by the way. And the other one is that they cannot put a farm worker to work in an area where their health or their safety can be endangered. And there's one other law actually that protects farm workers if they're migrant workers, and if they travel them over a certain number of miles, they have to provide the transportation free and housing and food for the workers. But unfortunately, throughout the United States of America, there are only 2 states that provide farm workers with the right to organize and unemployment insurance, and that is California and Hawaii. So some of the other states have partial unemployment for them, but most of the states do not. I think New York State, just in 2019, passed the Farm Worker Bill of Rights to give farm workers the right to organize in New York State. But the other states, can you imagine all of the rest of the states, especially in the South, because you've got the states of Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina, all of those places, they have a lot of farm workers, and yet they do not have the protections that the farm workers in California have. So it's got to, I think, become a national issue. Oh, one other thing. In Florida, they are refusing to give the farm workers vaccines unless they can prove that they're residents of Florida. And that's insane because so many of the farm workers there are migrant workers. And it's been a big fight there to get the farm workers vaccinated. And in New Jersey right now, farm workers are on a fast right now in New Jersey because they don't feel that the amount of resources that are being provided to them are equal to the resources that are being provided to other workers. So farm workers are fighting on all different fronts, and unfortunately, we still have a long way to go to make sure that farm workers are treated equally.
Who's taken up the mantle, Dolores? I know you're still fighting. I know even at 91, you are still a voice and you're still a champion for those farm workers. But are there junior Doloreses that have come along, that are out on the front lines fighting these battles for farm workers?
Yes, I think that we have seen with all of the protests and the marches, and many of those young people that are out there marching and protesting, they're also marching and protesting for farm workers in their local communities. And in fact, you mentioned the immigration bill. The immigration bill is extremely important because not only will it provide residency for the dreamer students, the DACA students, but it will also give the farm workers a green card so that they can continue working in the field without having the fear of deportation.
No, that's so important. Dolores, we've seen a lot of news, horrible news about the quote unquote crisis at the border. So we know that immigration bill, like you said, is going to impact farm workers, is going to impact those dreamers that are in the country. But depending on which news channel you watch, this crisis at the border is defined oftentimes as these unaccompanied minors who are coming into the country, crossing at the southern border. And the big question is, what do you do with them? We saw under Donald Trump, a lot of those kids were put into cages. They were separated from their parents. And we watched this really inhumane treatment of those kids at the border. And now, this is Joe Biden's administration. He's got to deal with, we see at least efforts they've brought a lot of those kids to Long Beach, California. So they have been trying to make more humane living conditions for them. But what do you think is the solution, to these thousands of kids that are crossing, many without their family members?
Yeah, well, we know that these are acts of desperation from the mothers and the fathers that are giving up their children to be able to do this because they were hoping that they will have a better life in the United States of America. And so it's a very complex issue. But I mentioned earlier that Joe Biden had mentioned something about trying to do something to help these countries. And, I often use the word bananas when I speak. And you say, well, what do bananas have to do with this? When you think of the jillions of bananas that we eat every day in the United States of America, and knowing that money does not go to the people in Guatemala. That money that we spend for bananas goes to Chiquita Banana, to Dole Banana, these banana companies in the United States of America, and it does not go to the people on whose land that the bananas are produced or the people that do the work to produce the bananas. So we have got to change our whole mindset about the way that we treat other countries. And we think of our partners, our neighbors to the south, that they should be the first ones that we should be helping them with their economic development instead of exploiting letting American corporations exploit those countries and have those countries remain in the dire poverty that they now live in. And then also to help them do something about reducing the crime in those countries, because we know, number one, a lot of the guns that are shipped to Mexico, to Central American countries, where do they come from? They come from the United States of America. We are the gun dealers of the world. And if we want to do something about the crime in those countries, then we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, where's a lot of that violence stemming from? It's coming right from here, from the United States.
How encouraged are you, Dolores, that the president has entrusted the vice president, Kamala Harris, with the task of I won't call her the immigration czar, but clearly has said he wants her to take the lead, to be the point on trying to address, this whole, call it a crisis, but what's happening at the border. Does that give you, a lot of confidence? Does that make you feel like we're going to get closer to something that looks compassionate and humane?
Well, I think the president needed somebody who was tough and somebody who had a heart, somebody who knows about immigration, because Kamala is, of course, the daughter of immigrants. And in California, she was our attorney general here. She was our senator, and she knows firsthand all of the issue of immigration. So I think he could not have picked a better person. And I do believe that she is up to the task, up to the job. And if anybody can do it, it takes a woman, and it takes a woman like Kamala Harris.
I'm with you on that. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I asked you at the beginning, at some point during the interview, if, some critics said that you were overlooked by Cesar Chavez, and we cleared that up. And, one of the things that you have received so many awards throughout your career, but one of the, I'm sure, and I'll ask you, what was it like getting that Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012 from President Obama?
Well, I was thrilled. And I was thrilled because he gave the award to a community organizer. And I remember when President Obama was running for that position, that Sarah Palin said, oh, well, he's nothing but a community organizer. She forgot to mention that he's also, been a state senator, an attorney, et cetera. But I thought, okay, well, she said he's a community organizer, and that's why he won the presidency, because he is a community organizer.
Yeah, well, we won't talk about Sarah Palin in this interview, but kudos to you. That had to be like a highlight of your long and storied career. Just a couple last questions for you, Dolores. As you look forward, and you think about, what this world will look like, or what you want it to look like, what does a border policy look like for you? Like, what would you, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it, what would you do at the border?
Oh, well, as I said, I think it's going to take several steps. I think, number one, we do have to make sure these children are safe, make sure that they can relocate with relatives. And I understand that some of them will be put into foster care to make sure that they're safe when they are put into foster care. But then we have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is to help those countries, to help our neighbors and our friends in Central America and Latin America to make sure that they can take care of their own children if they want to. And if they want to come to the United States, well, they're welcome to come to the United States also. But I think that most people do not want to leave their homes. I always like to say that we go to some of those countries for our vacations because they're beautiful. They're beautiful countries. So, and yet people have to leave their homes and their beautiful spaces to come here to the United States because of the dire need that they live in. And so we have to think globally now. I think the pandemic has shown us that what happens in one country can affect another country. So we have to become global citizens. And when we think about that, the corporations are already there. They do business all over the world, and they cross borders with money and goods and products. Well, if they can do it, then people should be able to do it also, okay? Because it is the people, after all, that produce those goods and those products and the money that crosses borders. So let's think of becoming global citizens and making sure that we protect and share the resources with everybody, so that we don't have to, like I said before, have the greedy and the corrupt rule, but that we can rule our world with democracy and by its citizens.
No, that's such an excellent point. And just last question for you, Dolores. Sometimes you can't make sense out of some of the conservative and Republican talking points when it comes to talking about immigration and the borders. But, one of the things they've been saying lately is that, Joe Biden, has an open border. He's inviting, people into this country, and that he has pretty much, given up on any kind of immigration policy. Help us, formulate something to say, to those Republicans who like to, try to stoke fear, which is a lot of what it is, trying to stoke fear in Americans, try to pit Americans against each other. Help us, respond to those folks who don't see the beauty in our multicultural country and have this nativist and, kind of go it alone that we saw under Donald Trump.
Well, I just like to remind them that this country was brown before their European immigrants came to the United States. And when their European grandfathers or great-grandfathers, or more recently when they came, people were not trying to shut them out of this country. And they've got to remember this country belonged to the indigenous people. And the indigenous people of North America and South America, we are the indigenous people of this continent, okay? So just get over it, okay? Just get over it. And the other thing I like to say is when I do my speeches at colleges, and I believe in science. And one of the things that science teaches us is that we are all one human race. We only have one human race on this planet, okay? And our human race came from Africa. Yes. So I'd love to say to all those neo-Nazis and white supremacists out there, including people in office that are white supremacists, okay? They are now revealing themselves. Get over it. Your forefathers came from Africa, okay? We are one human race. And so I like to say that we are all Africans of different shades and colors. So neo-Nazis and KKK and you right-wing racist politicians, just get over it.
Wow, that is so powerful. What a great way to end this interview. Get over it. We are all Africans. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Dolores, for sitting down with me. I'm going to say when you're 101, because I know at 101, 10 years from now, you're going to still be going strong. I got to sit down and, see what the last 10 years would be like for you. Just, anything on the horizons? Are you going to keep speaking at colleges? You're going to keep, raising issues of, marginalized people? Any other projects, any other movies or books or, medals of honor in the future for you?
Well, I have been honored so much, but basically we just want to work to make the world an equitable place for everybody and tell everybody to please call your senators to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment for women, for immigration reform, and for the PEOPLE Act, okay? Honoring John Lewis to make sure everybody is guaranteed their right to vote.
And one last shout out for the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Just quickly, what are you doing with the foundation and how can we support it?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, we're having a birthday event on May 22nd, and we'll be asking everybody to join us. We're trying to build a campus so that we can do our organizer training. Right now, we're doing vaccination clinics to make sure to get vaccinated. We're doing food banks. We're fighting the education system to end the racial biases that exist in our educational system against the Black and brown students. And we have a big youth group. We're working on redistricting, which we know is another big issue that's going to be helping us. And by the way, we're also trying to get healthcare for all in California to cover all of our undocumented residents in the state of California with healthcare. Okay, we already have up to the age 26 that they're covered, but now we want to cover everybody, all of the undocumented people, because we really can't be protected from COVID until everybody gets vaccinated, until everybody has health care, and we want everybody to have health care.
So we can donate and what's your website? Is it DoloresHuerta.org or DoloresHuertaFoundation.org?
It's DoloresHuerta.org. It's very simple. Dolores Huerta, that's DoloresHuerta.org. DoloresHuerta.org. So yeah, please join our social justice movement.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, everybody, go to that website, donate, support this movement. If Dolores at 91 is still changing the world, 40, 50 years later from when she started on this journey, probably, 60, 70 years later, all of us can play some part in, making the world a better place for folks, particularly those who are voiceless and who live in marginalized communities. Thank you again so much, Dolores. Always a pleasure to sit down with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sí se puede. Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you again so much to Dolores Huerta. My guest this morning had an opportunity to sit down with a civil rights icon. And thanks to all of you for joining. Thanks for your incredible comments and your questions. This is why I love this job, because I get to meet some of the most amazing people. I mean, this woman, 91 years old, did you hear her citing, facts and giving us those historical gems and dropping all that knowledge at 91? I can't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday, and she's remembering historical facts that happened literally 40, 50, 60 years ago. Woo, talk about inspiration. Some quick words to live by before I get out. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. Dolores Huerta embodies these words at 91 years old. She is still using her powerful voice, her platform, and her talents to serve. Her life is and should be an inspiration for all of us to find our passion and to serve. I'm out, y'all. Be safe out there. Don't forget to wear your mask, and don't forget that we are all in this together.